Welcome to Mom in Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat, and this is another episode of Behind the Sessions. And I want to talk about something that I believe is really, really important, and we just need to give some airtime to discuss. And that is the after effects of things like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and perinatal mental health conditions. And there's one in particular that is really important to highlight. And that is the lingering sense of guilt, sadness, regret, grief, anger, frustration that is as a result of feeling like you weren't really there. Like you weren't really there during that postpartum time. Like you missed out. Let me ask you something and take a moment to really sit with it. If this is you, if this is something that you can already resonate with, just getting started here, how long will you guilt yourself to make up for that time in the postpartum period where you felt like you weren't truly there? How long is enough? How much time will it take? When will it be enough for you to feel like you've made up for that time? The time where you feel like you weren't present enough, where you feel like you were not joyful enough, where you were not connected enough, where you weren't enjoying every moment like everyone told you that you would. How often do you beat yourself up for quote unquote not being there? How much do you worry that because of what you went through, that there is some kind of impact on your child or your relationship with your child or your children? Maybe you felt like you missed some of the milestones. Maybe you missed tiny smiles or little coos or laughs or quiet times in the middle of the night during feeding or getting ready to go somewhere that in your mind should have been fun or joyful. Maybe you missed those because your mind was in survival mode. Maybe you couldn't connect or didn't feel like you could connect as you were overcome with intrusive thoughts, or sitting with numbness, or feeling unrelenting anxiety. Maybe you were so weighed down by depression that you barely had enough energy to do the basics of the day. Maybe you felt like your mind was hijacked by what was going on. If it was depression or anxiety or trauma or bipolar or psychosis. Maybe you don't remember stretches of time because of just how intense those feelings were. Maybe you felt so terrified that something would happen to you or your baby that you were constantly on the lookout for potential threats to safety. And because of some or all of that, maybe now you overcompensate. Maybe now that you're not in the trenches of what that felt like, you push harder, you stretch yourself thinner, you give and give and give and try to make up for what you think you didn't give at that time. Maybe now you say yes when you want or even need to say no. Maybe you're trying to chase that perfect mom, super mom life because you want to quiet how badly it hurts that you missed that time. Are you telling yourself that you owe them that? Are you telling yourself that you have to push yourself hard because you have to make it up to them? But who told you that you owe anything for being human during one of the most disorienting, exhausting, identity shakeup, life-shifting, biggest time of change of your life? Who convinced you that survival wasn't enough? I think it would be hard to pin it on one person. Although there might be people in your life who have told you as much, who put that pressure on you. But it could have just as easily come from society. It could have become an internalized pressure, an idealized version of what you think motherhood should have looked like and how you should have shown up. Or maybe it's grief. Maybe it is deep, deep sadness that you missed out on a vital part of your life and of your child's life or your children's lives. It might even be regret that you didn't get help sooner or that you didn't get help at all. And any or all of those feelings could be misconstrued, misperceived, and misinterpreted to be turned back on you, on yourself as punishment. If you feel like you hadn't done enough, you didn't do enough, that somehow you failed as a parent, as a mother, you failed your child because you weren't there in ways that you desperately wanted to be there. Man, if you could have gone back and changed all of it, you would have. You didn't choose to be going through what you went through. You didn't choose to not feel present. You didn't choose to be suffering and dealing with depression and anxiety and whatever else was going on at the time. Nobody chooses that. But you might very well be punishing yourself because of it. And that is something to sit with and think about for a minute. Just even now, just take a couple of deep breaths and reflect for yourself. Are you beating yourself up? Are you punishing yourself for something that blindsided you, for something that you didn't want or ask for something that took you by surprise and knocked you on your ass? I think you've been through enough. I don't think you deserve or need punishment to yourself to make up for that time, because you have been through enough. This has been incredibly painful. And I also want to tell you a truth that might be hard to hear, might be hard to reconcile, is that you were there. You were there in all of the ways that you could muster. You were there in the ways that your mind, body, spirit, soul could manage at the time. It might not have been in the picture perfect way. It definitely is not going to look like some highlight reel or Instagram story about just the bliss of motherhood. But you were there in very real ways. And I bet you were there in ways that you don't give yourself credit for. That might have been changing diapers. It might have been nursing when you could, or bottle feeding when you could. It might be that you did respond to your baby's cries, but you guys cried together. It might be that even though you didn't feel like interacting, that you did interact. There are probably so many ways that you pushed through and that you did show up that you just don't give yourself credit for, ways that are incredibly important and impactful. You were there with your breath, with your presence, with your trying. Even the moments where you might have felt detached, you were still fighting to be okay for your child. You were still fighting to be okay for yourself. That is something that I know to be very true. That even in the deepest, darkest, most upsetting time of your life, if you're dealing with depression or anxiety or whatever, during pregnancy too, or postpartum, there is a fight going on within yourself. It feels terrible. Like nothing about it feels great. But I see it time and time and time again. Moms who are suffering are still trying. It doesn't cancel it out. You suffering, you dealing with depression or anxiety doesn't mean that everything has been taken from you or your child. It does not mean that you are failing. It means that you are overwhelmed. It means that you are overstimulated. It means that maybe you didn't have enough support. It means that maybe a perinatal mental health condition snuck up on you and made that period of your life, made that time in your life miserable. It might be that even while feeling miserable, you showed up in the ways that you could and shared smiles and laughs when you could. That could mean that outwardly you presented just fine to everybody else, but inside you were melting. Nobody handed you a manual or a guidebook on how to be joyful and happy with no sleep, with hormonal shifts, with a crying baby that you can't figure out how to soothe, with your community not showing up for you in the way that you needed, with how to deal with your partner when things change after a baby comes. Even though it felt like you might not have been connected, there's a drive there to push through, to make it through, to do acts of love, even if it doesn't feel like you can feel the emotion of love. Do acts of caring, even if you don't feel like doing them. Diaper changes count. Feeding counts. Responding to crying counts. Even if you don't do it the way you want to do it every time, not doing things perfectly does not equal doing things poorly. We have to stop thinking in those black and white terms. There's no such thing as perfect. We all mess up. I still mess up. That's just part of the deal. We're learning as we go. So even if you thought you weren't doing enough, or that you weren't enough, or that somebody else could have done a better job, that baby, your baby, needed you and got you in the ways that you could show up. And you don't have to spend a lifetime making it up to them or trying to overachieve or trying to attain perfection to make up for that time. What you need now is what you needed then. You needed compassion. You needed support. You needed loving thoughts. You needed maybe a hug. You needed to feel seen and heard and validated and understood. And you deserve that for yourself now. You deserve to give that to yourself now. You just went through some really tough things, maybe even one of the hardest things of your life. So what do we do now? Years later, months later, whatever, with guilt lingering, regret potentially lingering. You can't erase it. That stretch of time happened and it played out how it played out. So even though we can't erase it, we can meet it with self-compassion, because all of those things you needed then sound the same now. I understand why you feel this way. I understand why you felt that way. You were suffering and you needed support. You were trying your best with the bandwidth, the energy, the support, all of the things that you had at the time. And your internal resources are part of that. When we are depleted, we're depleted. You were trying your best to make something out of very little energy, very little bandwidth. So bringing in compassion for yourself is ideally what you would be able to give to somebody else as well who went through the same thing you went through, knowing what you know now, how hard it is, how challenging it is, how much of a struggle it can be. And compassion doesn't mean that you're like erasing what happened. It means you're bringing a gentleness to what happened. It means you're bringing yourself into the picture, the fullness of your humanity. It means you're telling yourself that you deserve care also. And as you're bringing self-compassion in, you might feel another wave of sadness because something might be softening within you that you had hardened against. If you had approached yourself with punishment, that's harsh. But when you approach yourself with care, that's softness, and that can bring up potentially a grief that you haven't yet expressed, a sadness about that time that you haven't yet felt through. And that's okay. Feel through that. That is a real part of your experience and deserves the light of day. It's okay to feel sad that things didn't turn out the way that you wanted. I would argue that it's not okay to punish yourself for it. It's not okay to continue to make yourself feel bad for it. I don't know about you, but guilt is not a big motivator, not in any real sustainable way. It's a shame inducer. It doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't make things better. It, I think, prolongs pain and prolongs suffering. And I think that that's not how you wanted to show up in your life in the first place. So there might be healing that needs to happen. And grief, allowing grief to be there and process it, is part of healing. Bringing compassion in can support the healing process. Just notice if you are resisting it, that's information. Why is it that you feel like you can't offer compassion to yourself? But here's something you can try. When you have a moment or right now, close your eyes. Picture the version of you during that postpartum time. Not what you wished it had been like, not the picture perfect ideal, the Instagram version, the real one. Pajamas, messy hair, mess around the house, haven't showered. Or if you went the other direction and tried to make it look like everything was perfect, but you didn't feel that way inside, go to that feeling. Just create that picture for yourself in your mind. Put your hand on your heart and say, I see you. You were doing the best that you could. And I'm sorry I've been so hard on you. That version of you still exists somewhere in there. And that version of you is still suffering, even if you feel okay now. If you find yourself looking back and get that like twinge of pain and twinge of guilt and start to blame yourself all over again, then you need a little bit of that healing, of being able to see that version of you and give love and give kindness and give gentleness to that version of you. And you can tell her that she doesn't have anything to prove anymore. She doesn't have to keep doing this. And you don't have to keep doing this. You don't have to keep beating yourself up, because that also spills over. I mean, you need your own healing, but if you're walking through your day and walking through parenting through a lens of guilt, through a lens of feeling bad, that is going to shade how you interact with yourself. It's going to shade how you interact with your kids. It might even give you lingering feelings of anger. And I don't know, there could be a lot of reasons you feel angry, but if that anger is towards yourself, it is going to be coming out in other ways as well. Whatever your process has been, whatever your healing journey has been, or journey, if you've not quite, don't feel quite like you've healed through some things yet, you have grown, you've changed, you've shifted, and your healing matters and will continue to matter. It impacts you, it impacts your kids. When you can offer yourself that compassion, when you can try and reduce the amount of pain and suffering you feel and guilt you feel over, quote unquote, not being there, or that time feeling robbed from you, or you feeling like you weren't the parent that you should have been or wanted to be, it just does shift how you are in your own body. It shifts how you think about yourself and what you feel about yourself, and therefore how you interact with others. So if me talking through this has stirred up something for you, whether it's just reflection, a realization, tears, relief maybe, being seen, being heard, being witnessed, if you will. If you feel some relief, I'm not only speaking to you about this as a clinician, a psychologist who hears this all the time, but I was that parent. It took a little bit of time after everything settled to not be hard on myself for missing out, for not showing up in ways that I wanted to. That is part of the healing process. And you deserve self-compassion on an ongoing basis. It is a practice and it takes practice. It's not a one-time deal, but you deserve to practice it every day and learn and grow to treat yourself differently for as long as it takes. Maybe it's the rest of your life. Cool, fine, whatever. There's no end point goal supposed to, even in this part of the journey. And if you're somebody who's listening to this who didn't quite have that full spectrum of experience that I've been talking about, but there are even parts of your time that you wish you could change, or you think about, or you regret, or you punish yourself over, this is for you too. Even if you didn't have a diagnosis, even if you think that maybe you were dealing with something, but it wasn't ever really confirmed. You don't have to have had a diagnosis to feel bad, to feel stressed out, and to wish or hope that things had gone differently. And if you found this helpful, please share it with a mom who needs to hear that her healing is valid and worthwhile, that her efforts are seen even if she can't see them herself, and that she is enough even if it feels like she isn't. So I hope just hearing this, thinking through this for yourself, helps you to be just even a little bit more gentle with yourself moving forward. I thank you so much for being here. Until next time.